Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Experience Kills. Today with me, as always, your host Ben, is my co-host, my partner in crime, the man I couldn't do this without. It's Richard.
Yeah, he's back. Yeah, go Crackers Wild.
Yeah, bringing all that high energy for this very thoughtful, slower paced, mature, narrative focused puzzle adventure game that we've been playing. It's what do we think? Relicta? Does that sound right?
I thought Relicta.
Relicta. Oh, I like Relicta. They do pronounce the thing in the game, don't they? Can you remember how it's pronounced in the game? Is it Relicta?
I think so.
Okay.
I was going to say the way it's pronounced in the game, it's difficult because all of the characters in this game are of Indian descent.
Which is really interesting, I thought.
It is interesting.
It's
one
cool.
of the most refreshing things about this game. I thought, oh, that's good. I wonder if the developers are of an Indian background and this is their way of, putting their stamp on the game's media because there's not enough representation. But actually, no, they're Spanish, or at least the development studio is. So, yeah, even more interesting that they chose that and really refreshing to see, I thought. But, yeah, the point being, don't know how you pronounce it with the Oxford accent, not sure.
I am not. I'm going to resist the urge to try and do this with an Indian accent because we're English and we have a little history with that part of the world. So I think perhaps let's err on the side of caution on that one and not go for that. So this is a first release game, first ever release from this little studio in Spain, Valencia, I believe it said when I was looking on their website just now, and they're called Mighty Polygon. And one thing you first notice, I think, with this is that it's got a strong, high fidelity, quite colourful visual style, doesn't it? It's going for this far future science fiction set on, no spoilers really, set on a terraformed moon, our moon, and it's been like completely terraformed with all these different biomes. And I think that's a cool concept. It's completely... I don't think I've ever played on a terraformed version of the moon in a video game before. I think that's pretty unique. And we're in the 2100s, aren't we? So we're quite far off into the future. And the concept behind this puzzle game is you have the ability to manipulate the sort of polarity and the physics of cubes.
Yeah, so it's based around magnetism and gravity.
Yes. And that means you get into these beautiful high fidelity environments, and then you pick up boxes and put them on pedestals and find out how to open gates. Yeah, that's kind of it. That's the puzzle. But then we do have this high concept sci-fi wrapper around it, which kind of was the draw for me. It was pitched to me as Asimov-esque science fiction and with a Portal-esque puzzling. So you're the big puzzle guy. When I got offered this, I was like, I've got to get Richard on this because I want him to look at this because he's the big physics puzzle guy. He loves those games. It's so his jam.
I do.
How are you feeling about this? Because you're a bit more patient than I am. I'm not the most patient of gamers. I'll admit that. I get when something pushes back, I can bounce off. But you're a bit more take your time, get into it. How you feeling?
This game has some problems. I think problems that come from different areas. One is the puzzle side of the game. I don't feel like I'm a big fan of the narrative side of the game either. And visually, you talked about it being bright, futuristic looking. It's a very 90s view of the future. It feels too clean, too crisp, too anodyne. Actually reminds me of... speaking of anodyne, looks like Datadyne, so it reminds me very much of Perfect Dark, that sort of vision of the future, futuristic fonts, brash colours. That said, it does look quite nice and particularly smooth, considering it's what I assume a fairly low budget small release. It's only a small studio and it's their first game. Looks very good considering, but yeah, I'm not that enamoured by the aesthetic overall. The story, I have problems with the characterisation in this. Really went in optimistic that they had new representation for Indian culture and Indian characterisations in this, but it doesn't really develop into anything substantial. I felt like the interactions between the different characters felt forced, overacted. There's far too much swearing in there. I'm not normally.
I was gonna say so anodyne, clean, beautiful, like vision of the future, and yet they're dropping F-bombs like in every other sentence. In one bit of dialogue, I remember there's this phone call going on between your character and your daughter, and I like that they're going for that familiar relationship, and you're playing as a female character. It's all female characters pretty much in the main roles here again, which is great, really good representation. But yeah, she gets interrupted in this phone call by her boss, who's just like, go and do this effing now, get this effing done, and they're all doing it in Indian accents, and it's like, this is really peculiar. Are they? I don't know anything about really Indian culture, but I've never thought of them as big swearers. I mean, it's like I just got a bit. Is it just because they could get these voice actors and went, that'll be different, or like they're not really bringing anything that speaks to them being Indian in any way, to being from a different subculture? Maybe that's intentional. Maybe that what they're saying is in the future, in 2100s, it doesn't matter. We're all the same, aren't we? So we're all just humans, so we all interact in the same way to each other. I mean, I don't know. There was a lot of swearing though. It did stand out as an odd choice.
Stand out, doesn't it? It really does stand out. I didn't think it was related to the heritage of the characters or anything like that. I think it was just a symptom of poor writing and putting in anger in place of personality. I had a problem with that. Getting to the meat of the game, though, so the puzzles.
The boxes.
That's what we're here for, isn't it?
The boxes. Box gameplay.
Yeah. Picking up boxes and doing stuff with them. That's the popular trope these days after Portal's companion cube. Usually get some good fun out of that idea. And it's no different here. It does have some good concepts. So as we said, it's based around the idea of magnetism and gravity. You can charge boxes either red or blue, which is the polarity, and then add gravity or anti-gravity elements to them. And what that means is you can have boxes that are attracted to each other, boxes that repel each other, boxes that float in the air, or boxes that fall, and combinations of those different options with you thrown into the mix. You can stand on a box and maybe float across a ravine on it. Stuff like that. So it's got some good ideas. I think it starts off with a pretty steep learning curve. So you found this as well, didn't you?
Yes,
Ben? In the first,
I really did.
Some of the first puzzles, they can be quite tricky to work out what you've got to do, particularly when you're just learning the mechanics of the game. Worse than that, though, I found, was that even when you've worked out what you do have to do to solve a puzzle, it doesn't necessarily work the first, second, third, fourth time, because the way that the physics is built and the way that the puzzles are designed means that it's very easy to fail, and you need almost pixel perfect reactions to maybe start a box going on its travels and then doing something else mid-journey to interrupt it. So that's either you standing in the way, changing its polarity at a certain point when it's hovering over a ledge. It's really hard to get right, even when you know that's the solution, to the point that you think, well, maybe it isn't. Have I just got this all wrong? Because it's just too fiddly. And in the opening areas of the game, I don't think that is forgivable. They really needed to do more hand-holding, putting in barriers, guiding where the boxes are supposed to end up, rather than it just be an open map.
I think, yeah, that's really nailed it. I mean, I think the environments you find yourselves in are interesting because they are varied. But the problem that you look at Portal and you're like, well, they were in these clinical test environments for a reason, especially in the first game, because it meant understanding the mechanics was self-evident. Whereas in this situation, because you've got lots of, strange geometry and uneven surfaces, sometimes things will behave in ways that don't work. Like you were talking about, I know exactly what you mean about, you know what you've got to do, but you now have the tricky part of pulling it off. That's not fun. That isn't rewarding. That's just frustrating. That's all that is. And I think for me, the trickiest part of the onboarding was, first of all, you're given all of the mechanics very rapidly in quick succession. And then secondly, the most important thing that it's quite easy to forget is that you your character is a very important part of most of these puzzles. It's not just how the boxes, like you said, interact with each other, but how you interact with them during their travels, as is often the case. Which combined with, you've got multiple ways of interacting with them. You know, Portal was brilliant in its simplicity, in its concept, and therefore, you know, it was quite easy to get outside of it and break the levels, because what you did was actually pretty basic in most instances. So it was easy to understand and extrapolate how you'd interact. Whereas this, you've got a lot more options, and it makes it a lot more complicated. And I think that would become rewarding, but it's probably given to you a bit too quickly, and therefore just becomes something you might bounce off of, unfortunately. And just give you too much resistance. There's not enough of that rush when you solve something, because it's so hard to actually execute it. So yeah, I did find that unfortunate. Yeah, definitely.
That's the thing. You don't often get that rush of, oh yes, I've worked it out, because what comes before should be what happens if I do this, and that's what Portal did so well. It put you in the centre of the puzzle, really. As a character, it was you that was dropping through holes, being flung up towards ceilings, and there was that kinetic rush doing those things, which made it fun to try and experiment and work things out. This sort of goes the other way, of you almost being static amongst these boxes moving around a lot of the time, and not having that moment of clarity, because you worked it out long before the mechanics let you actually do the thing. So it's almost an anticlimax when you get it right.
Also, for me, what's very fresh in my mind, I don't know if you've had a chance to play it yet after we talked about it a few weeks ago, is Superliminal. And it's like, that's a great example of this type of puzzle game, this first-person immersive puzzle experience, but bringing a lot more in the way of unique gameplay and concept to the forefront. And I feel like this is a perfectly good game. It's almost like they're trying to do too much, though. Like, they could have honed it down.
What did you think of the story side of this? Because I'm quite down on it, but I think you've got a slightly different view, have you?
I think it's fine. I quite like it. I like that. Let's take it into the future. I like, you know, lofty sci-fi concepts. I like the fact that, you know, we're dealing with stuff on a terraformed moon, which I think is really cool. I kind of like, I think I see what they were trying to do with the characters, which is make them quite naturalistic and gritty. I do think they were trying to sort of ground us in a place where it's like, you know, a bit blue collar, butting up against the sort of scientist. I did struggle to like understand what your character is meant to be. Like, why am I running these tests? I am a scientist, but I'm also seemingly like the handyman. Am I? Like, what's that all about? I couldn't quite understand. And then my daughter's coming too, and it was like, okay, cool, sure, why not? But I was interested enough to want to find out what was going on. But the problem for me is I reached a point quite early on in the puzzles where I just couldn't progress. I was completely lost and completely confused, and just banging my head against a problem where I felt like there was no progression where I could find the solution. And we've spoken about it, and you've told me what the solution was for that puzzle, and I'm like, well, I was never going to get that. I would just never have gotten that.
It's a bit cheap, because we won't spoil it, but the puzzle that you got stuck because there's a hidden piece that you didn't find. And I just think that early on, it should not be hiding things from you. It should give you what you need to solve the puzzle to get to grips with it. If you want to do hidden stuff later on, fine, mix it up. But opening with that sort of puzzle is not fair on someone who wants to get into that experience. There's something to be said for storytelling in environments, and I was really disappointed with how Relicta handles that. I am going to keep comparing it to Portal, because that's the game that started this sort of trend. Portal does a really good job of keeping the story going even through its when you're deep in the gameplay mechanics, it still feels like you're progressing through a narrative. Doesn't feel like that in this. It feels like the story is on pause while you are solving puzzles. It's like two distinct games. And particularly since this makes an effort to realise the environments, they're outside of a lab. It tries to make this more of a lived experience with trees and terraformed areas on the moon. surely that's a better environment to do some storytelling, but it sidesteps all of that until you get the puzzles done, which I thought was disappointing.
I also thought the justification for the puzzles in that environment was weak. Do you remember it? So you first get into that first biome after the tutorial, and you walk outside, and there's like, and you speak to the AI person. You go, really? Why are these puzzles still switched on? And the AI goes something along the lines of, I'll tell the scientist council that you want to turn it off, but you'll have to do paperwork for it. And so you just kind of go, all right, leave it on then. I'll just keep doing these puzzles. And it's like, so the puzzles, they even acknowledge that the puzzles don't actually have any relevance for what you're trying to achieve in the game. They're just in the way, and it's just like, really? That's very strange that you would say, you almost like in development they had the environment artist and then you had the puzzle designer, and they're like, well, my puzzles have got to go somewhere, homie, I'm putting them in your environments. And it's like, it's all like, that's so strange. Like, why is it not cohesive, like, and actually thought out as a way of like behaving within those environments? And that then speaks to the problem we had with the puzzles, which is that they don't always work in the environments because of the physics and stuff, and they can cause you issues. Like, you've got to slide that box, but I have to keep incrementally moving the box closer because each time it slides, it's not quite enough for me to pick it up again or something ridiculous. And it's like, this is just awkward and fumbly, and it's the opposite of satisfying in that regard. It's a shame because I'm looking at this going, man, there's so much potential here. Like, it looks great, the physics are great, the gameplay is there, you can see it. It just doesn't all come together, does it? It doesn't mesh into like a satisfying whole.
I think it's a good concept and a good underlying engine. Yeah, you're right, it doesn't quite mesh. That said, I'll probably go back and play more because I do enjoy this sort of game. I just find it frustrating that, having been quite a long time in development, it sounds like, I've seen people commenting on Steam that it's been on their wish lists for over a year. People are obviously excited to play this, and it's not a bad game. I've enjoyed it, but that makes it all the more frustrating when you see these problems.
Okay, so that was us looking at Relicta, however you really want to say it, on the Xbox One. That's where we reviewed this. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope that's given you some insight into this game by Mighty Polygon. And look, let's be honest, as a first game, it is quite the achievement, especially from visually, and like we said, there's a lot to like here. It just doesn't all quite come together, but good first attempt anyway, guys. And if you ever need anybody to pop over to Spain to help out, do let us know. Maybe not right now because of quarantine, but anyway. But it'd be a nice holiday. So we've been Experience Kills. I've been Ben. You can find me at DIYE on Twitter. Richard is also available on Twitter at Colonel Red. You can find us as a collective on Twitter as Experience Kills. Please give us a like and subscribe. We are approaching a real milestone right now on the channel, and we're quite excited to be getting there. There may be some stuff coming around that point as well, so do keep an eye out for this. If, however, you're watching this video 3 years after the fact, like so many people do, ignore everything I just said, because whatever, YouTube. So we'll be back soon with another video, and that's been a puzzling good time, Richard.
Oh, mate, that was a stretch. You're right, cut off now. Hit stop. Bye.